Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to innovate, grow their team, and accelerate their business. I'm here today with Chris. Chris, would you please introduce yourself?
Hey, Ben, Chris Seferlis. I work full-time for Microsoft as a director of technology strategy. I also teach part-time at Boston University as a professor of big data engineering in the computing and data science school.
Cool. We run in similar circles, and so this will be an exciting episode. I'd love to get to know you first. The way that I do that is I'd love to know, how did you make your first dollar as a human being?
Good question. I think my first job was working for a small sports card store in my hometown. I was 12 and working the counter for a guy way back then. That was where I got started, and you can see the memorabilia. So I still
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, that might make this question a little bit redundant. Was there a toy or hobby that influenced what you do career-wise today? I can guess that what I love about memorabilia and sports cards and all that is all the stats and things there. But was there a toy or hobby that you feel like influenced what you do career-wise today?
It's funny, I did love the sports cards area. I used to do sports card shows and stuff like that when I was young. I had my own table. I mean, 13 probably. I think that's where the sales area comes from. That is part of my job today. But I was actually a tech geek even back then. I had an old Commodore 64 that one of my dad's buddies pulled out of the trash, and I used to mess with that. And I loved it. I love just playing around with different things beyond the gaming, a little bit of programming. That's not really my forte. I think that really led me down that path.
Yeah, same. Commodore 64. Love trying to figure out. We tried to figure out the candy store by the grocery store so we could go in there and get different game packs and stuff.
Nice.
And at one point, we were trying to do over our modem connection, like tic tac toe and chess,
Oh, yeah.
which would be trivial. Tons of words with friends, chess with friends.
Sure.
The only problem is you couldn't talk at the same time. No built in chat functionality. So we're hanging up the modem connection, waiting until the other guy realized we were gone, and then picking up the phone. If our parents had only paid for a second phone line, we would have been set.
I know, yeah, that was the worst. Anything you had to do, or somebody pick up the phone and they come yelling at you because they was making all these crazy noises,
Yeah.
or the expensive phone bills.
Yeah, I remember my first major initiative company was an online travel company. We had been driving hard to make everything performant, return the airline fares, and get everybody shopping online. And so much so that all of us had mainstream internet, and we had to troubleshoot an issue for users that were still on 56K modem, where they were just getting half the page. The Commodore 64 is still around. The form factor, at least, is around for the nostalgic.
I just saw they just created a new version of it or something just to play around with it and stuff. It's pretty.
Yeah, it's like an i7 with 32 gigs of RAM. It could smoke anything. It's just that form factor, those clacky keys. Cool. Is there a quote from a famous person that lives in your mind rent free?
Yeah. So there's actually two, if you don't mind. One of them is from Benjamin Franklin. I'm not going to do it verbatim, but it's basically, in essence, most men die at the age of 25. We just don't bury them until they're 70. In reference to how many people take a job and stay static in that job for the rest of their lives, and they just stop learning and growing. So that's one of my favorites. And another one was, I believe, from Confucius: don't let perfection be the enemy of good.
Yeah, love that. Two great quotes. I hadn't heard that Benjamin Franklin quote in a long time. And I mean, past couple of years, I've been in a pretty heavy professional, personal growth story or professional development. Probably spent over 300K in personal development material and classes and events, and have gotten so much value out of it. I honestly think in tech, the space we're in, we're almost in the industry of learning
For sure.
because it's constantly changing. My YouTube channel is much to my wife's dismay because to her, it's super dry and boring. But I just love seeing what people are doing and experimenting with, and that learning skill is super consistent.
For sure.
Cool, man. I'm excited to dig in with you. You've simultaneously, as you shared, you're a director of technology strategist at Microsoft, plus you're a professor at Boston University. How does this dual role shape your perspective on what innovations actually work in practice versus what sounds good in theory?
It's funny, it takes me back to when I was in school myself. A lot of it was around theory. I started with a business major in information systems, MBA information systems, and a lot of it was theoretical. You see all these business models throughout all those classes, and you never really see them in the real world, but you do apply a lot of the logic by both being in industry, having the opportunity to work with a lot of really cool customers that are doing a lot of really cool stuff. but at the same time, hopefully helping to shape the future of our future technologists. My students are data science majors primarily. We've got some computer science and stuff like that too, but giving them the opportunity to see a little bit of the world through my eyes and my experience. And so it's this cool thing where they're almost bookends to the students that I have in a way.
Yeah, just seeing how business analytics in general has evolved. We used to be fine with a monthly business outcome. The very trailing indicators were fine. We just run our business off of trailing indicators, make slower, more long tail shifts. Now, if you're not following a leading indicator, you're dying, or it feels that way. You can't breathe unless you know what's going to happen. How have you seen that shift between more leading indicator based metrics or predictive analytics versus where I think we were even just a couple of years ago, where functioning off of the results was fine?
It's an interesting question because we have this mix where some companies want to be tech forward. They really want to embrace what we're doing going forward. And then you have these other organizations that have that if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset. It feels as though they want other people to make the mistakes and then give them a roadmap for how to deploy technology and maximize their efficiencies. One really good example that comes to mind, not on a personal level, Apple's getting a lot of heat right now because of the failed AI launches in Apple Intelligence and some of the challenges around that. There's a lot of people in the news saying, is Tim Cook still the guy? A lot of shakeups in his senior leadership teams. This is Apple, second most valuable market cap in the world, right? It is an interesting thing where AI and those predictive elements have become so important to organizations, but not everybody's really embracing it.
Your mission that you've shared online is to demystify data mechanics for aspiring minds while helping enterprises transform operations. What's the biggest gap between what students learn about AI and what businesses actually need?
I think there's a lot of confusion about the quality of data within an organization. Oftentimes, we have students that are getting a nice, clean data set that they can go and run their algorithms and build a model. And unfortunately, they're just not aware that they're going to walk into an organization and the data for a large portion of organizations is a mess. I think that's probably the biggest gap. And that's actually why I love data engineering because they're helping to fix that mess.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we're implementers, partners with all three major clouds, and we see this over and over again. We saw it in the DevOps transition, where it's like the business was like, I need more of the DevOps. We're not deploying fast enough. We need more of the DevOps, but there wasn't a clear definition of what that meant. And so then when we broke that down, then we need to completely code the infrastructure. Okay, wait a minute. That sounds expensive.
Right.
I think something similar is happening with AI as well. I want more of the AI. And we go, okay, that's great. Are you really sure that you know the things that you do, or are they kind of in people's heads?
Yeah.
And even just like product awareness and pricing and the things that folks are doing in operations every day are very much inside the discussion inside the company. They're not captured in data. I think that hurdle is a little bit, you're halfway into a project and discontent about how hard this is really going to be.
Yeah, for sure. My first book was about deploying cognitive services, an AI suite of tools from Microsoft. It just so happened they changed the name of the marketing a week later after the book was launched. So that didn't really help matters. But the reality is that a lot of organizations are unprepared and they don't even know it. I'm starting on my second book, which will take some of the lessons from the first, which was more of a practical implementation guide. And this will be looking at the core ideas of how do you evaluate, deploy, measure the value, and then optimize it after it's all done. Organizations really struggle with it. And the cool thing is that you mentioned DevOps, and there's a great book called The Phoenix Project. It's written in the form of a story. My goal is to have a version of that, but for AI that tells a story, but then teaches a lesson at the same time.
Oh yeah, sign me up. Whenever that's available, I would love that, because I do think there's a story that's needed about how someone broke through that, what kind of processes they implemented to start to capture some of that data. It could even be spreadsheets or something that just really canonizes. The other thing I've started advising folks that if you don't have business process SOPs and you're not at a certain level of maturity, you need to go solve those problems first. If you're starting to spend money on AI and data consulting and business process automation, you're going to burn cash if you don't know how your business runs, if you haven't made some of those hard decisions. And what I love about the market right now is it's getting all the small business folks super engaged. The small business folks are like, how do I scale this thing without adding 5 more people, without even adding one more person? How can I do this?
Right.
And I think that's so great that's happening. But then there's of a reflection back on them saying, okay, but how does your business operate? Like, you need to go write that down first. And paying people to do that for you, it's not super effective. It's clunky. Pulling it out of you is expensive. It takes a lot of time. And if you're trying to decide things at the same time, it's rough.
Yeah. I've gone through an 8-month project with business process mapping and notation and spent a lot of time on it. Came up with a book about an inch and a half thick of different recommendations, mapping out the processes, different ways to improve some of them. 8 months down the road, and a fair amount of money that we spent on the project. We worked with a consulting group when we did it. And the CEO said, I knew all this stuff. If you knew all of it, why aren't we fixing it? The nice thing about the crossover with things like Gen AI, Copilot, is that it helps if you have your data in that type of state where it's clean. For the things around creativity, the ability to maximize the capability of those tools to drive efficiencies is awesome, because now you can say, here's my process. How could I make it better? It's not just a generic example or a template. It's going to give you some really good logic based on what it's trained on.
How do you balance Microsoft's commercial interests with your academic responsibilities, writing a book? How do you provide objective education about technology choices?
It's funny. So I've been a Microsoft guy my whole career. Organizations that I worked for, I always was a Microsoft shop, as we say in the industry. And I also see the warts, right? To this day, I see the warts. I see the challenges that we do have in some of the areas that could probably use a little more attention. I have had students make comments about how it's a big sales pitch for Microsoft and stuff like that, because we do use Azure in the class. But I try to make it very clear to my students that what we're using are tools. What I want them to understand is the logic, the process, the mindset. And as long as you understand those things, you can use any tool. And I use Microsoft because it's first party to me. I understand it. I know how to help troubleshoot and things like that, rather than spinning up something open source and having to learn a whole new set of tools myself, which I don't have a ton of bandwidth for to begin with. By giving them student accounts on Azure, they get $100 free credit every year, and having those tools available. These are just tools. It's a very sought after capability and skill. If you want to develop that and get certified, this is a good place to start, but use what's going to come best to you.
Yeah, and the synonym mapping to AWS or GCP is not that difficult. We're fairly cross-trained across the different clouds. I will step out into a little bit of bias here. I'm not trying to stir up mud, but we see Fabric as a packaging of underlying tool sets. The packaging is rough. Everything under the hood works, but some of that surface packaging is rough. The great thing that Microsoft has done is there's a known issues list with Fabric that you can check out. We've just found ourselves sitting on that page a few times going, man, I wish it would work this way.
And candidly, this project was undertaken years before Fabric was announced. And with the success of Power BI, the CVP who ran that group wound up taking over the Fabric group, internally called Project Trident. The reality is that Snowflake was eating Synapse's lunch, Azure Synapse. And it was large in part to the simple way that Snowflake could be spun up. And Snowflake is very specialized in that data warehouse area, whereas Fabric reaches far beyond those capabilities. To your point, it's immature, right? Another way of saying rough. And depending on what you're trying to do with it, absolutely, it can be an amazing tool, the great unifier, the capabilities that you can get from it. And then on the flip side, there can be a little bit of a challenge in doing very specific, unique things that a lot of organizations have to work with.
Yeah, I'll go on record. I've said this to many people before. All paths are leading to success right now. We're seeing very successful data platform implementations in Azure. We have several case studies of very successful implementations in Azure. This isn't a power user's feedback. Folks that are listening to this going, should I go with Azure or AWS, GCP, Databricks, or Snowflake? All those paths lead to success. It's not like it used to be where you'd get stuck in some unknown destination and not be able to work out of it. This is more of the efficiencies that we're all dreaming about, where we push a couple of buttons. We're somewhat romanced by the cloud on how many things it made super easy for us.
Right.
There's somewhat of this expectation that, like, oh, it should all just work. It's been fun to experience that, hey, this is where Microsoft is going. This is where the other cloud providers are going. And we want to join those early stage, less mature things. I was an early adopter. I worked for some online advertising companies. And so I was an early adopter of Hadoop when Yahoo released it. It was clunky, right? The things we have today for distributed data processing are just so far above it. But man, I really enjoyed those times being able to process terabytes of data with distributed cloud services, where my alternative was to go ask my board for another 50K in server resources. And that conversation wasn't going to go well. So we're somewhat spoiled, I think, in terms of all this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of organizations worry about vendor lock, but what's important to realize, no matter which cloud you go with, no matter which vendor you go with, there needs to be a real evaluation to look at all of your requirements and understand what those requirements are to see which is going to be the best package for you. None of them are going to satisfy all of the requirements. So we see Databricks is much more geared toward data scientists, machine learning, some of those types of workload. Snowflake is more geared toward the data warehousing component, business intelligence, and those kinds of things. And Fabric's trying to do it all. The reality is all of these companies are competing for organizational dollars, and they're going to continue to build those services and improve their products because somebody else will if they don't. And that's the beautiful thing about competition.
Yeah. And what I found is all the cloud providers are willing to lend a hand, both lend a hand from an advisory capability, but also lending a hand in terms of funding some of that learning process.
Yeah.
So there's dollars available to help ease that transition from an on-prem environment to the cloud environment. That help extends beyond just documentation. That help extends to some financial options, and they want to make your project successful. And I think they all kind of share in that. If you've plotted your course and see the right solution, if you're already a Microsoft shop and you have a footprint in Azure, the competitive differences, I don't think, from the seat I sit in, are worth all of a sudden having multiple clouds that you're managing and the different security profiles. That may be a bit much for your team. So if you're already 2 feet in with a cloud provider, sometimes sticking in there to get done what you need to get done is the best move, rather than this analysis paralysis. In DevOps, we're kind of get into this common tools discussion, which gets exhausting because there are like 4 different tools for the same thing. Do we really have to compare every single tool, or can we go in the family direction?
Yeah. When you look at comparing the different cloud providers, they're all competing to organizational dollars. They want to increase market share. Oftentimes, you'll hear about the big cloud vendors buying the business. The reality is that may or may not be good for the consumer, because just saving some money or getting more incentives up front doesn't mean it's the right tool for the long term. And it needs to be more than just a financial decision.
Well, you focus on harnessing Azure AI to transform operations and enhance efficiencies. With all the AI hype right now, how do you help customers distinguish between transformative AI applications versus incremental improvements?
That's a tough one because there's so much uniqueness in the market. Everybody is at a different stage in their journey as it goes to digital transformation. What I find really interesting is that organizations that are 40, 50 years old that still do the same thing that they've done since day one now are starting to say, we have troves of data we've captured all these years. How do we use that to create a new market for ourselves? How do we use that to help our customers improve what they're seeing from us? So now you're adding a much broader service component. And a lot of that is being driven by AI. Think of back office productivity, RPA you mentioned earlier, things like that, squeezing out some of the inefficiencies and allow people to do what they do better than AI, creativity, on their feet thinking, and things like that. How do we get value from the data that we generate every day that we've been generating for 30 years?
Yeah, good. I think you mentioned a couple of really big nuggets there. One is your data is your asset. Even if you're an agency and you have 20 years of PowerPoint presentations, that could be a huge asset for you that's now available through some AI processing into maybe a common RAG, or just there could be value there. I also think the way each business has so much data and it's so siloed, I wonder if there's a data sharing market that probably exists, but not at a level business executives and business owners understand. I think of the shipping company that's analyzing weather so that they don't lose product. They're wanting to buy, it's intrinsic to their operations, but it's not their core competency. Their core competency is to move product from overseas to the US or move it around the world with less risk. But they may have these pockets of data that could be marketable products. And that's where I think there's a gap. What do you think?
Yeah, you're seeing some of that in various spaces. We have all of this data anyway. How can we take advantage of it? It's not their core market. There are a lot of organizations that are afraid of that change rather than working with their existing operations, sales, finance, marketing, whatever teams within the organization. You're actually seeing a lot of them spin that out as a grassroots group that doesn't have to go with the old way of doing things, and they get a little bit of leeway. But that's a hard story to tell. You got to have a champion, usually in the C-suite, that has that vision and sees what those possibilities are. And to your point, it's definitely not embraced as it really could be.
That ends up being the stealth mode startup that spins out when the employee leaves. I think you're definitely giving some executives a tip here. If there are those innovations going on, you might want to embrace those. Otherwise, in 3 to 5 years, that's what is now a $10 million business that your employee left to start. You work with CXOs and VP level executives on technology alignment. What's the most common misconception these leaders have about implementing AI in their organization?
There's a fear factor around security elements. Their data is just being curated to be used to retrain models. That benefits nobody. Google, Amazon, and Meta sell data ultimately for advertising dollars, but they're part of specific programs. Nobody wants to alienate their customers and just take their data and use it for their own gain. It's unethical. Customers would not be happy about it. I've had many folks say, oh, well, just look at our tenant and tell us what we're doing wrong. It's just like, I can't do that. We don't have any visibility into that kind of stuff. That misconception that we're just doing whatever we want with their data is a really bad one. There's a lot of fear about their data being leaked or misused and things like that.
I think the fear extends to if I as an employee, embrace this, then I'm going to lose my job. We've heard that a lot. Going back to the RPA, we've implemented some RPA for folks. Yes, the department didn't necessarily grow, but people are really hard to manage. They're hard to inspire. They're hard to motivate. The business may not be successful with hiring a bunch of people to scale their business idea. And so we saw this shift where with the folks that were responsible for the RPA, we said, you are still responsible for quality. So true human in the loop, you're still responsible for quality. And we encouraged the business to incentivize based on total output. So now there was this happy relationship between, okay, we're going to tell you all the things that the bot does wrong, all the things that AI isn't doing correctly. Good. We need that feedback to make a superior solution. As it scales, you're going to see the upside. That took a moment to get the folks that were traditionally doing all the work themselves to go, okay, wow, this could really help us.
People, process, and technology, right? It's the three-legged stool. Technology is the easy part that most people don't believe because they're afraid of technology. Process can be mapped, worked through, understood, streamlined. That's what business analysts do all day, every day. It's the people that are unpredictable. It's the people that are challenging. My wife teaches preschool, and she's got an integrated preschool class. Tell me that AI is going to replace her job. It's just not going to happen. Preschoolers are just far too unpredictable. And she's an expert and an amazing teacher. And for those reasons, she'll never be replaced by AI. I'm very confident of that. 100 years from now, I'm sure things will be a little different, but it's definitely, the people part is definitely the most challenging piece for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Your tagline, solutions that immediately provide value in an industry obsessed with the latest AI breakthroughs. How do you maintain focus on immediate business value?
It's a matter of making sure that you are understanding what a project is going to cost, measuring where the value will come from, right? It's critical work and it's forgotten sometimes. If you're able to understand what's the impact of what this can do based on a very small pilot or proof of concept that can be incredibly inexpensive. In the first book, we've got some mapped out that cost zero to build your own proof of concept. And then working into how to measure anything, right? How do you break this down into an increment of value for the time saved, the costs saved associated with it, and then just back into it and say, here's what the ultimate value is of this project. And you work on those first, right? What's going to be the most visible? What's going to get the snowball rolling downhill?
You've talked about integrating the art of leveraging data-driven culture with practical technology solutions. What does it actually take to transform an organization into being truly data-driven?
People. The reality is, if people aren't comfortable with what they're doing because they're seeing the technology as a black box, they're much more difficult to get on board with changes. By making sure that it's clear what is being approached, what the expected outcomes are, and how to measure those outcomes. How do you set up your KPIs, determining what good looks like, but at the same time, going back to my quote, not going so far that it takes you too long to implement, or by putting so much money into it that it takes that value away. Data can provide everything for us if you're willing to collect it. You look at health situations and people measuring what they eat every day and stack them side by side. People who don't measure what they eat every day and track what they eat every day. And I promise you, the people who do are going to be making healthier choices because it's right in front of them and it's being measured, right? And so when you can see that data, you're measuring that and building your case internally.
Yeah. As a business, as a person, what you track will improve. This is a huge mantra in our company and in our family. What you track will improve. It can start with a simple habit tracker. We have team scorecards now, and immediately upon creating the team scorecards, things started improving. Code commits went up. The amount of code reviews, like everything improved as we put it as a metric. Somebody had to put a number in a space and say, this is what it was. And I think that is a misconception. I want to go back to that because I think you and I are in the industry, and hopefully the folks listening to this are not necessarily in tech, but they need tech to accelerate and grow. So we talked about, hey, I want an AI that does X. And then our immediate response was, okay, going back to the data. Let's break that down a little bit more, because I don't necessarily know that everybody listening could track that as fast as we did. We want to do something with AI, but we need to have all of our proprietary data organized in such a way that the AI can see it and use it, and it's contextual and relevant to the problems we're trying to solve with AI.
Sure.
So then you went to data engineering, super familiar with the medallion architecture, but again, we're talking tech terms.
Sure.
Break down the practical AI implementation for a business owner that's maybe between 10 and 100 million in revenue, and they want to have an AI-enabled solution, but they don't see the forest through the trees.
Sure. The first thing I'm going to tell that business owner is to work with your top lieutenants and get a list of areas where they believe AI will help optimize the business. The big buzz these days is around agents. Most people probably don't understand what an agent is or what it does, but ultimately it's leveraging the large language model to contextualize what you're trying to accomplish by giving it a recipe, a set of steps that it's going to follow to accomplish what it is you're looking to do. And you go out to your lieutenants and you say, hey, from everything you know about AI and everything you know about our business, where do you think we could improve it the most with the least amount of lifting, the least amount of headache, the easiest use cases that are going to make that impact? When you can measure the information that you need and put a value on what you believe that project will give you, you map it out, you understand the process, and then you are able to operationalize those steps using the associated AI capabilities. Not necessarily large language models, agents, not necessarily machine learning models, right? So you have all of these different tools now that can be used in concert to ultimately come up to value-based conversation and figure out, how do we deploy this?
What we've been doing is overlaying the AI journey with the medallion architecture. The bronze layer is all this raw data coming in from all the sources. The silver layer is where you're combining that into useful data products. The gold layer is what you're going to report your SEC filings off of, and you're going to run your business off of. The data going through your business kind of goes through these stages. What I've started to think about is that the AI workflow is somewhat similar. Bronze is really like giving ChatGPT team licenses to everybody, or Copilot licenses inside Office 365 and saying, hey, go experiment, but you're at the center of this. You're going to go grab the spreadsheet from wherever, or you're going to connect the spreadsheet in Copilot Studio. You're going to give them enough training to be able to orchestrate an AI workflow themselves, and they will get a ton of value out of that. In much the same way that in data engineering, if I pulled in all the IVR data, I could give them total call volume, holds. I could give them some value out of just one data source straight out of bronze if they wanted. But in the AI world, it's just go figure out these use cases, these workflows. The only downside to that is it's the Wild West. You can't monitor that. You can't measure it. Folks are just going to find those use cases where, hey, if I connect to this spreadsheet and I ask this set of questions, then I'm getting something that's productive.
Sure.
When we come into silver, we got to start wrapping some traditional programming around that. And this is where I think people are somewhat disillusioned. I'm still going to have to do some traditional programming, either create the data pipeline for those data sources or do some API work around the LLM to start to guide things. I might need to create a new data store, a vectorized data store for contextualizing some of the data we have in a RAG implementation. So silver is where it starts to come together. I put that agentic stuff in that gold layer where it's taking care of a business function, like answering all your tier one customer support questions. And that's great, but that's only going to come after we do the bronze layer discovery, the silver layer integrations, and then the agentic kind of comes in that final category. I don't know if that's the best way to describe what I feel like people are going through. And maybe you can fine tune that for me.
It's interesting. I definitely see the parallels you're making. The only challenge is the common business leader is not going to know what we mean by medallion architecture. But there's absolutely, I think a lot of organizations will struggle. We're all asked to do more with less these days. We'd struggle to find business leaders willing to make that investment in their people to be able to say, yeah, I want you to go play with this for a few weeks. The point is absolutely valid. Those that are curious, those that really want to maximize what they're doing and improve the organization, they're going to get in there and have some fun, right? It's going to be really enjoyable because it's just cool. There's really neat stuff that you can do and get that analysis out. For each of those metals, if you will, using that same metaphor, you're picking up the steps in the instructions that you're going to feed to that agent. You're doing all the heavy lifting in the first two areas there, and then building your case and exactly how to deploy that agent. I think a really good parallel for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And definitely, I need to sharpen that in terms of ease of understanding. But that three-stage evolution is what folks are finding. And yeah, there's still definitely some costs there. It's not just like automatic. And I think you've addressed that really well. And even if you're at the current stage where you can say, hey, here's Copilot, here's ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, I want to give you enough training to go figure out some use cases. And you're still going to do some of the orchestration. You're going to connect different files to the chat and you're going to work it out. There's still so much short-term efficiency value as long as we're communicating, because we're not going to automatically track it. We're not going to know what folks are doing unless they communicate.
Yep.
But even if you were in that stage, that's a great time to be in. And that's super accessible for anyone. Like you said, document the use cases, find some stuff that you can understand. Like I grabbed a set of data, maybe it's our product list or our price list. I put it in a chat and then I'd start asking pricing questions to help me answer customers' pricing questions faster. That's a great win. And let's count that as a win. Not do that in secret or not communicate, hey, it's working this way, but not that way. It's just going to be highly collaborative if you stay there and won't move to what most businesses really want, which is more automation.
Yeah, customer service / customer support story with large language models is just incredible, whether it be through a chatbot or starting to see a lot more organizations bring them into a website through documentations, FAQs, that type of stuff. These aren't the old canned answer FAQ responses that we would get from chatbots for a long time. There's real thinking happening there, or interpretation, I guess is a better way to put it. When customers come to me and ask me random isolated question about licensing or tech or supportability and things like that, just throw it into Copilot and then you got to check your sources because it can misinterpret some of that stuff.
Yeah. Checking your sources is a really interesting one. I think we're going to start hearing about more mistakes that folks are making. the garbage in, garbage out large language models. And if we're putting those into enterprise systems, I definitely think we're going to start hearing about the downsides and mistakes over the next few months. It won't just make the mistake once, like a person might. It's going to make the mistake at scale. There's been several problems we've run into where, man, if we had just written traditional code for this whole thing, we wouldn't have had to do so much ticking and tying. Through that whole process, there's so much that we discovered.
Right.
We wouldn't have known all these other things. We wouldn't have seen how people were going to interact with the chatbot, or we would have done it in this finite set that we know now, seeing how people are using it. But there was some value in having it be wider to start with and then becoming more precise over time. But I think it's not unmistakable that a generalized LLM is a very wide solution. Like you're bringing the big guns to something that might be super narrow. And I think we saw that with law, where folks started using it to write their briefs. And then the lawyer argued from a case that didn't exist. He argued from a hallucination and got disbarred for it. And so that's just one example, but I think we're about to hear some much larger scale issues that'll give people some pause.
I agree. It's actually related to my biggest concern about working with AI. We're looking to these tools to give us answers immediately, and the journey is being lost as a result. As you mentioned, you're learning a ton as you're going through this and making mistakes. And that's the only way we learn. If the answer is at our fingertips all the time, and we trust that answer to be at our fingertips all the time, it can be wrong. Plain and simple, it can be wrong. I think of an example where a customer asked me about something and I put it in the chat. The answer came back, oh yeah, it's absolutely supported. I'm going to double check this. I went through and I scoured every documentation link it provided, and I could not find where it was getting it from. And if I had gone back to the customer with that answer immediately, not only would I have misled them, lost some kind of reputational component with that customer. Trust but verify comes in for sure. On a grander scale, working in the education space and seeing the abuses of the tools and assuming that it's the right answer is really challenging. The students don't understand why. I pride myself on giving students homework that they can't use to get a direct answer on ChatGPT. But then beyond that, I require oral presentations, require on-the-spot thinking that they can't use the tools, because I'll know whether or not they learn the material by doing that. Maybe it's something they'll never need. Maybe they don't care about being a data engineer and it's not something they're ever going to use. But the reality is that's why we go to school, right? That's why we learn these things. The phrase that I like to tell people is you could not get off your couch and go run a marathon tomorrow unless you were trained to be a marathoner. It takes time to train for a marathon.
That's right. That instant gratification is alluring. I was in a Bible study, and the second class in the series was to write a personal Psalms. I needed to accomplish this task. So I gave Claude some really great personal details from my personal development and faith journey, and fairly vulnerable in there, and plugged it in, and I got a wonderful Psalm. I put that in the paper. I spruced it up a little bit. I owned that work. That was my work.
Sure.
But then I come to the Bible study and we're going around the table, and the second guy that goes is so emotionally connected with the work that he's done that he's vulnerable, emotional about his work. And then I come to mine and I accomplished the task, but I feel like I missed the point.
Yeah.
And what I really learned from that is you're going to lose emotional connection when you introduce AI. So I warn people about that. But I think that's the downside of some of the vibe marketing and some of the things we're seeing. You're going to lose emotional connection.
Sure.
It may be punchier, good writing, but emotional connection with your customer is what makes the sale, not how you wrote an email.
It's an interesting exercise, though. If you went back and compared yourself to this other person who was in the class with you and said, can you recite that Psalm? I can almost promise he's going to have a lot more of it. He probably wouldn't know it word for word and the overarching themes of it, right? Because you were taking your own information and put it in there. This other person with that emotional connection, the time spent really digging deep and choosing the right words, it's definitely a different experience.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that was a great way to bookend our talk with all the potentials of AI and all the things that you're working on, but with some cautionary tales. And so I think that was a great way to wrap up. If people liked what you've had to share today, how would you like them to connect with you?
LinkedIn is best. I'm the only Chris Seferlis that I know of in the United States. LinkedIn is generally where I'm most available. I still do a little bit with X and stuff like that, but LinkedIn is definitely my number one.
Great. And who specifically would you most like to have a connection with?
Honestly, I enjoy the aspect of educating, mentoring, helping people out. I certainly only have limited bandwidth, and so I do my best to help folks out. But really, it's if you have questions and anything we talked about here today, it's stuff that I'm reading about every single day. It's stuff that I'm learning about every single day. I'm not going to ChatGPT to tell me, hey, what's the latest? Or even if you want to disagree with what we had to say. I love having multiple perspectives as well.
Cool. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. I think folks are going to get a lot of value out of this. I certainly did. So, yeah, thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah, it was a great chat. Thanks for having me.